We'll keep trying. So first question. Can you tell me what the color of a person's brain is based on their skin color? Okay, I love these kind of questions, but it does show that the person asking them is a little bit behind current brain function information. So here's the deal. I don't care what color your skin is. You know, that is a pigment issue that you got from your parents. I didn't choose my color, believe me, or I would not have picked this one. It is not very practical. You know, 5 minutes in the sun, I'm covered with freckles. An hour in the sun, I've already got the possibility of 6 more skin cancers. It's just ridiculous. And I promise you, when you get to heaven, I will not be this color. I've already told the Lord. Okay. So here's the deal. I don't care what color your skin is. Every brain on the planet is the same color. If you put your hands together, that's about the size of your brain. If you put a gray glove on your left hand, that would be the color of your left hemisphere. A white glove on your right hand, the color of your right hemisphere. So it's pretty ridiculous to try to link the color of the brain with people's skin, but they do it all the time. The second question I got was, what do you think of mixed marriages? He didn't ask me the question. Okay, so then how are you defining the word mixed? If a male and a female marry, that's a mixed marriage. Hello? However, I think the intent was, what do you think of mixed racial marriages? I don't care. There's more mixed racial marriages on the planet today than ever before. Now, marriage is the single most difficult thing you will ever do. Getting 2 PhDs was a piece of cake compared to that. But it will also be the most rewarding if you get it right. You don't have much chance of getting it right until your late 20s, because your prefrontal cortex isn't even going to be mature till the late 20s. Why do you think Christ didn't start his ministry till he was 30? His brain wasn't done yet. And as a preacher's kid, I was a little judgmental growing up. I don't know how that happened. And I sometimes said, why did he wait so long? Why didn't he start his ministry when he was 20? Look what he could have done in 13 years. No, he probably would have messed up. Because you do not have good decision-making ability until late 20s. Some people are lucky. They marry earlier and it works, and some people just grit their teeth and bear it. Wonderful example for their children of a marriage. Now, here's the only question about a mixed race marriage. All things being equal, the more alike you are, the easier it is to keep a marriage on track. You bring to a marriage 3 or 4 generations of biological, ancestral, cellular memory. The more different those backgrounds are, the more you're going to have to deal with. That's basically it. Do you have the same food history? Do you have the same social interaction history? Do you like the same things? And so on and so forth. Otherwise, it can take a lot of negotiation. Okay, this Christmas we'll do what your family wants, but next Christmas it's what I want. And then that can be a problem. If you know that going in, and you know that your children will not fit into either one, because one pure race doesn't really like a bunch of mixed race kids. But if you live on the west coast of America, or Hawaii, it's not going to be so much of a problem. But if you live in other parts of the country and the world, it can be a problem. I have really good friends in New York City. He is black, she is Caucasian. They have a darling little mixed race girl. I'm telling you, mixed race kids are pretty. They're really, really attractive. It's just like mongrel dogs are much smarter than purebreds. And that's the truth. Nevertheless, there are places they cannot go in New York because they risk getting physically injured because they are a mixed race couple. So, that's all I got to say about that. Except don't rush. The person you think you want to wake up next to every morning for the rest of your life, when you are 17, can be light years away for who you want to wake up next to every day for the rest of your life when you're 27. I had a girlfriend who got married when she was 15. Her parents had to sign for her. Go figure. Well, she had 3 children by the time she was 18. I guess at 15 she didn't understand about birth control. So she calls me one morning when she's 21, and she says, Arlene, I woke up this morning and I looked around the house and I said, where did all these people come from? Because she said, even at 21, I would not have made the choices I did. I love my kids, but I wouldn't have had them or even the dog if I had really thought about it. But now she's got 3 kids. What's she going to do? Love them, I hope, but children can't raise children. And your corpus callosum, the biggest highway that connects your 2 hemispheres, is not even paved until you're 21. I mean, you're running on a road full of gravel and potholes, which is the reason people whose brains are supposedly done look at teenagers and go, why did you do that? What were you thinking? Well, they weren't. They just hit a pothole. We got to give you guys a little slack. Your brains aren't done yet. But knowing that, really be careful of the decisions you make. It will impact the entire rest of your life. Okay. So we went one too far. I'll get used to this. All right. Lots of discussions about what human beings really are. Who are we? There seems to be general consensus among many brain function researchers that whatever else we are clearly 3 things. We are spiritual. Note that I didn't say religious. The human brain is spiritual, the spirit with which you live life. That spirit can prompt you to align with a religious organization, but that's a choice. We are relational. We are built to connect with each other. That was all Christ's life on this planet, according to Scripture and Josephus and other historians. He connected with people all the time. We're designed to connect with people and nature. And we are sexual beings. Your brain is your main sexual organ. That may be a big shock to some of you. But it is your main sexual organ, just like it is your main musical instrument. Those of you who take music, and I hope you do, because people who study music have a different brain configuration than those who do not. And they often find many things in life much easier to do. So, we are sexual, meaning we are genetically, compositely different in the 2 main divisions of our species, males and females. And it doesn't matter whether you're sexually active or not, you're still a sexual being because your chromosomes are different. So, we know, and I've worked with addictive behaviors since the late 1800s, we know that, and I don't know what you find humorous about that. I was born with hair this color. Dyed it for a while, but I've given up doing that now. You can develop addictive behaviors around sex, period. You can develop it around religion. You can become addicted to another human being, but you cannot become addicted to genuine spirituality. And that's why, in my brain's opinion, that's one of the most important of these three composites. Now, I don't know if you know this information, but we're going to go over it lightningly quickly. And if you want these slides, you can get them later from Chaplain David. All right, so you know that, well, when I went to Loma Linda University and started out in nursing, again in the late 1800s, we learned that there were only two variants of the Homo sapiens species, males and females, and that females had two X's and males had an X and a Y. And if you've seen this before, I think it's kind of fun to blow it up and look at it. These are the first, well, those are all the chromosomes, but the first 22, you get one of each from your parents. And then the X, which if you look down at the bottom right-hand corner, the one on the very right is the Y, and the one next to it is the X. The ovum is the largest human cell in the body. The sperm is the smallest. I was speaking at a university the other day to freshmen, college freshmen, and a hunk in the back stood up. I'm not so far over the hill I can't recognize a hunk. So this hunk stands up and he says, Dr. Taylor, there's a mistake on your slide. I said, well, there could be because I'm not 100% flawless. What is the mistake? Well, he says, look at that little tiny Y, it's broken. I said, no, it's not broken. That's the Y. And he goes, it can't be that small. I said, well, it is. And he wanted to argue, but I don't argue, so I just listened to him for a while. And then one of the girls spoke up and said, why do you always think bigger is better? Sit down and shut up. So I was able to go on. All right, now, for years we thought that's all there was. And when I first started, let's go back to this. When I first started at Loma Linda, this is all we knew. A fetal brain was supposed to template either into an empathizing female brain or a systemizing male brain, period. That was it, no variation. And Dr. Simon Baron-Cohen, which is a researcher, especially in the field of male-female differences, figured that 95% of the population could fit on this continuum. We didn't know where the other 5 were, and we didn't know what they looked like, but he said 95 would fit. Okay, fast forward 20 years. Ooh, we got some more information. We learned that those 2 divisions were unsatisfactory. They didn't cover everybody. We had to develop a new piece in this continuum called the intersex brain, who could be either 2 X's or 2 Y's. But what makes them unique, and there are probably only about 2% of the population who are intersex, but they're out there, and they are 50-50 people. They've got 1 testicle and 1 ovary. Or they've got a piece of tissue that's a combination of both of them. We're not really sure how that makes them different, except if you're looking for somebody to marry and you're thinking of having children, you might want to know whether the person is an intersex person or not, because some of them have a uterus and some don't. But they do have the ovaries and the testicles. I was talking to a ministerial convention not too long ago, actually, and they wanted me to talk about the current research. And one of the ministers put up his hand and he said, how am I going to know who in my congregation is intersex? I said, excuse me, it's none of your business. Well, he said, I think I should know. And I said, well, what would you do with the information if you did know? Well, I don't know, but I think I should know. I said, so what are you going to do? You're going to stand at the back of the church? And as people walk out and you shake their hand, are you going to say, you look female. Do you have 2 ovaries? Or, you look male. Have you got, the right equipment? There are no words. I told him to forget them. Ask about their spirituality. Forget about their sexuality. Now, so then we move on. And we have so many patterns identified now, and more being identified every day, that it's mind-blowing. So you can see that we've got the typical XX female with 46 chromosomes and the typical male with 46 XY. But look, we've got females with 3 X's, Turner syndrome, 47 chromosomes. We've got 4 X's, 48. We've got 5 X's, 49. We've got 1 X. There's no equivalent in the male. We've got females with 1 X. And we don't even have all of the characteristics patterned with what that means, but they're out there. There are more variation possibilities for males than for females. So you've got the 46, but then you've got 2 different patterns for 47 chromosomes, XXY and XYY. And there's things like Klinefelter syndrome and so on, and you can look them up if you're interested. There's 2 patterns for 48 chromosomes, 3 patterns for 48 chromosomes, and 3 patterns for 49 chromosomes. So it's not as simple as we once thought. So, sexual misuse. This is a problem in our country today. I would like you to avoid it if at all possible, because it will negatively impact your life down the line if you don't. And we're talking about sexual misuse as masturbation, pornography, promiscuity, sexual addiction, phone, internet, sex, and sexual affairs. And 40 million people in the United States, that's a chunk, are involved with internet sexuality, and probably not something they'd want to be involved with if they realized that Christ was sitting right there beside them as they used their internet. Now, what's the overriding reason that people get involved with sexual misuse? Well, poor self-esteem and poor self-image, period. And that's a pity. Because if you are a Christian and you believe that Christ loved you enough, that if you were the only person who made bad choices on this planet, he still would have come and died for you. There's no excuse for poor self-worth and poor self-image. If you were treated badly in your family and you develop problems, with the Lord's help, you can undevelop them, because you are valuable, period. Psychiatric disorders, anxiety is the #1 psychiatric disorder in the United States and pretty much in the world right now. And depression's right up there. Self-medication, people trying to forget about their painful childhood. You don't want to forget, you just want to heal from it. You want to remember what happened to you in a non-emotional state so you can protect yourself from similar things in the future. Abuse during childhood, family dysfunction. There are no functional families on the planet, period. If you think your family was functional, that's a sure indication it wasn't, because there are no functional families. There are, however, levels of dysfunction, and some of those are worse than others, and then any other addiction. I'd like you to understand that the human brain was designed to feel good. It wants to feel good. Dopamine is the feel better chemical. Anytime dopamine increases in your body, you feel better. But if you get addicted to dopamine, you're going to also get addicted to substances, behaviors that trigger that high release of dopamine so you can feel good really quickly. The only problem is it only lasts a few seconds. So now if you want to feel good again, you got to do something else that triggers the dopamine. And pornography on demand, which is everywhere on the internet, is a surefire way to boost your dopamine and feel good immediately. But it will create problems for you for the rest of your life, because if you choose to marry and have sex with your partner, it's never going to feel like a huge shot of dopamine. And so you're going to think, I thought this was going to be a really rewarding relationship. This really isn't all that exciting. And that comes from an addiction from dopamine. Now, Scientific American Mind. I like reading that magazine. If you've not heard of it, it's got the latest on a lot of brain function things. And remember, this is brain function. So 2016, they released an article. They took brain scans of male brains while they were actually ejaculating, having an orgasm. I don't know how that happened, and the article didn't say how they induced that, but that's what they did. They found, if you look up on the right-hand corner, you can see a cutaway of the brain if you cut through your nose and straight back. You'll see the brain stem. You'll see the rind on the watermelon around the top, which basically is the cortex. And then in the middle, you have the limbic area. And right between the brain stem and the limbic area is a major hub of the brain reward system. So they're doing this PET scan, and the guy's ejaculating, and lightning goes off in that part of the brain. And this is the bottom line, and I want you to memorize this. The intensity of the male response at ejaculation is comparable to that induced by heroin. Got it? Thank you. That is the reason that sexual misuse and sexual addiction occurs much more frequently in males than females. Because I'm not shooting up heroin. I'm just masturbating while I watch porn. All right, now they took females. And this must have been a little trickier, because in order for a female to even have an orgasm, she has to feel safe and protected and undisturbed from the kids walking in or whatever. It's a totally different thing. So many women, I don't know if you've ever heard of the movie When Harry Met Sally or When Sally Met Harry. And there's this scene in the restaurant where he says something like, she said something to the effect that many women don't have an orgasm. They'll have sex with the guy because they're trying to please him and they're looking for love, but they never have an orgasm. And he says, "Are you kidding?" He says, "My girlfriend is moaning the whole time." So she goes, "No big deal." And she's sitting across from him, and she starts to moan. And the whole restaurant is looking. And she goes, "You think your girlfriend is having an orgasm because she's moaning. She isn't, or she wouldn't be moaning." Because here's what they found on PET scans. much of the female brain went absolutely silent or dark at the moment of orgasm. Because for a female, it's not about a shot of heroin. For a female, it's a release of tension and complete relaxation. And that's why it's not going to happen if you don't have a good relationship with your partner. Bottom line, at the moment of orgasm, women do not have any emotional feelings, period. Fear and anxiety need to be avoided at all costs if a woman wishes to even have an orgasm. It's going to be entirely different. But Hollywood, many of the movies, lots of stuff on the internet would really make you think otherwise. But I was meeting with a group of males who had sexual addiction problems. They had a little trouble with this. And I said, look, if the woman you're with is moaning and carrying on and writhing in bed, she's play acting. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So you've heard couples starting to date each other. And one of them or both will say, we've just got such good chemistry. Yeah, they do, but that's all it is chemistry. That's all it is initially. It involves hormones, neurotransmitters, and sexual energy, because remember, we are sexual beings, and it all starts in the brain. When two people have a sense of falling in love, and initially that is pretty powerful. You know, they're checking their phone every few seconds to see if maybe they got another text. And just anticipating that will give them a hit 400 times larger than if they had a dose of cocaine. It's amazingly powerful. So that is fueled by a tsunami of very powerful hormones and neurotransmitters, the most powerful of which is something called phenylethylamine. Now, if you don't know how to manage that, you've just set yourself up for affairs, unplanned usually. And if you're listening to anything on the internet, and I try not to listen to too much, but in Hollywood, here's the deal. If you're not having sex with someone by the third date, there's something wrong with you. And if you are having sex by the first date, this relationship will likely never last, because phenylethylamine doesn't last. 18 months is tops. Pregnancy, STDs. Here's what I think is even more problematic. Every thought you think changes your brain. Every behavior you exhibit changes your brain. And you build cellular memory for every sexual interaction you've ever had or ever will have in your entire life. And the more people that you've had sex with and the more cellular memory that you have built, the more difficult it will be for you to be monogamous if you ever decide to get married and be monogamous. Do you realize how rare it is to find anybody in this country that really ever has been monogamous? That means you've had sex with only one person, the same person, your whole life. We practice serial monogamy in this country. You meet somebody and you get attracted to them, and if you believe Hollywood, you're already sleeping with them by the third date. And after a while, maybe a few months, maybe a year and a half or so, it's not so exciting anymore. So you break up with them. You only had sex with them while you were dating them, but now you break up, you meet somebody else, you have sex with them. We practice serial monogamy, not spelled C-E-R-E-A-L. And that cellular memory will totally impact your future. The brain, I love this quote, one of the brain researchers said this, the brain is the most amazing organ on this planet. It's the most amazing organ in the universe. It works 24 hours a day, 365 days a year until you fall in love. Then it gets hijacked by phenylethylamine, or PEA, that tends to result in the pea-brain effect and actually turns you into a pea-brain. The younger you are, when you start getting this interaction in your brain, the release of phenylethylamine, the higher your risk for becoming addicted to it, because your brain isn't done. Very, very easy for a brain that's not done to become addicted. It's not so hard for some of the rest of us, but it's very easy when your brain is young. And if you come from a background that was dysfunctional and your home wasn't very happy, and you have poor self-esteem, and you are having trouble even with relationships, the higher risk you are. Because it is so powerful, it will override cognition and reasoning, and it's highly addictive. It's natural in your brain. I eat avocados and dark chocolate almost every day because they have phenylethylamine. I feel really good. I'm not addicted to them. I don't eat them every meal. I don't eat huge quantities. But you might try it. You might like it. We're talking about chocolate, 70 or 80%, though, very little sugar. Now, it's a naturally occurring neurotransmitter that is very much like amphetamine. So when you become addicted to PEA, you are in effect addicted to an amphetamine. And this is responsible for the feeling of elation, lack of mental clarity, head over heels sensation, but it usually starts dropping off after about 18 months. The relationships that are really good and that really last likely don't even have sexual activity until they're engaged and at least very close to marriage. Because the minute you have sex with somebody you're interested in, because of the heroin push that the guy gets and the complete relaxation that the woman gets, if she's really okay with what she's doing and feels safe, is so exponentially above the emotional cognitive relationship that you really do want to develop, because that's what lasts, that it can be a big problem. So 18 months, that's about it. Unless you're being sexually active, and you might have a little more PEA for a little bit longer because of the heroin effect. But if the male is addicted to this and it begins to drop off, he starts saying, she's not as exciting as she used to be. I think I'll break up with her and find somebody else. And you see that in the world today. Even if he marries, he's at high risk for having an affair because he wants that shot of heroin instead of the tight bonding that can occur year after year as you learn more about each other and love each other more deeply and so on. PEA also triggers norepinephrine, which is another powerful hormone. So if you're thinking about dating and getting engaged and marrying, nobody taught me this when I was a girl, but this is what research suggests. Get to know the other individual's family. Is that the family you want to be the in-laws and the grandparents to your children? It may not be. The more you have in common, the less energy it's going to require to keep the relationship going, and I talked about that earlier. Trying to change the other person is absolutely a dead-end street. It's never going to get any better in some aspects than it was when you were dating. So if he never opened the door for you when you were dating, don't expect it after you get married. And if she kept putting you down in public, She's going to do that after you get married, too. You can never change anybody. They can only change themselves, and it takes work, and so few people do. The past is the best predictor of the future. Let's say, women, you meet a guy that's cute. His looks aren't going to last, but he's cute now. I mean, he may not even keep exercising, and his body may get out of shape, too. You meet him, and you are really, really enamored of him. But there are a few things about him you don't like. Now, you're not perfect, so you can't expect him to be flawless. But this I will tell you. Research shows that if you really want to marry a quality person, the only way that's going to happen is if you yourself are a quality person, because relationships are like water. They seek their own level. So when young people come to me and say, there's no decent people out there for me to date, I look at them and I go, oh, great. What can I do? I'll tell you what you can do. You can write down the 10 most important characteristics you want in a partner. And then you become that person yourself. That's the only way you're going to be attractive to and attracted by other people who are at the level that you really want to partner with. And if you do that, wonderful people are out there. I told one girl who was saying, I can't find anybody to date. I said, where are you looking? She says, well, I go to the bar every night. If you're looking for somebody who's got a low risk of becoming an alcoholic, a bar is not the place to pick them up. And so on and so forth. You know that. All right, let's see. We might have... So Confucius. I was at the same university and I showed a quote by Confucius, and another hunk said, did you meet Confucius? He supposedly said, it is not that I do not know what to do. It is that I do not do what I know. Now, I'd be willing to bet that every one of you in this room know what would be your best choice. Whether or not you do it is another question. And Paul said basically the same thing. He said, what I don't want to do, what I hate, I do. And what I want to do, I don't do it. Something's wrong here. No, that's the human condition. So it takes continual vigilance. So, to be successful in relationships, and healthy sexuality is totally a part of a good relationship, you have to deal with all the underlying risk factors. You have to look at the other person's family. They have to look at your family. I'll tell you one quick example, and then we might have time for a couple of questions. One of my best girlfriends called me up. She had several boys. One of the boys came home when he was 17, and he said, Mom, I've met this wonderful girl. She's just bodacious. And the mother's thinking, 17, okay, my goodness, it's 4 years before his bridge is even paved. But she said, well, bring her home and let's meet her. So he brought her home, and she was pretty and cute and smart. So after she'd gone home, he said, well, what did you think of her? He said, well, I think she's very nice. What do you know about her? He goes, well, she was a heroin addict for 5 years, but she's clean now. She's been clean for 3 months. And his mother was wise enough not to say very much because he was a saver. If you badmouthed anybody, he'd take their part. She said, well, I'm really happy when people clean up their lives. And I'm really glad she's been off heroin for 3 months. But you do know that that's a pretty potent addiction. You know, what if you got married and had some kids, and you're off at work, and you come home and find out she's relapsed? Who's going to be taking care of the kids? Plus, you've already given them cellular memory for heroin addiction when she got pregnant. Because cellular memory passes on to 3 or 4 generations. Oh, he said that won't happen. So time went on. They date. She is nice to the girl, of course. He comes home, he says, Mom, can I borrow some money? And she said, for what? He goes, I want to buy her a ring. She said, if you can't afford money to buy a ring, you are too young to buy a ring. I'm not lending you money to buy a ring. Well, he says, I guess I'll have to get a second job. She said, do whatever you need to do. So several months later, he comes home. He has bought her an engagement ring. My friend said she had to get a magnifying glass out to find the diamond, but there was one. So a few more months, he says, I'm going to ask her to marry me at Thanksgiving. What's she going to do? Didn't say anything else. The day before he was going to give her a ring, he comes home, sits down on the stool in the kitchen, and she says, what's the problem? Anything you want to talk about? No. So she went around, kept on doing what she was doing. He sits in the kitchen. Finally, he says, she relapsed yesterday. She's in emergency department because of a heroin overdose. Mother didn't say anything, but she nearly fainted when he said this. You know, I've been thinking, Mom, what if I marry her and we have some children, and I'm at work and she relapses, is going to take care of the kids? Mother's on the phone. She said, I didn't think he even heard me. So it was kind of sad to break up. And people ask me, well, what do you think about that? Don't people have a right to clean their life up? And I said, I'm delighted when they do. But you're talking about your children and the next generation. Do you want them born one down already with cellular memory for addiction? Do you want to make life harder for them? Those are hard decisions, and you can't make them when you're 17 or 19 or 21. So, take a page out of somebody else's book and learn now so that you have the future that you really want. All right, do we have any more questions, or are we done? Well, have you got any? This always puts me right on the hot seat, you know that.
Okay. I was going to ask, have you ever done any other research projects besides this one?
Have I ever done what?
Any other research?
There's tons of research out there, and I've done research on lots of things for years and years and years. You can go to my website, you can look up brain references, you can find examples of lots of research.
Alzheimer's research?
Alzheimer's?
Or dementia?
Oh, yeah. Now, that's a very interesting question, dementia. There's several kinds of dementia. There's dementia from laziness. There's a big study going on right now evaluating how much television a person watched on average during the day and whether or not they got dementia. Because when you watch television and movies, you are not doing active mental processing. You're only processing what some other brain did, and it does not challenge your brain. So they're taking some of these people, cutting them off from television, which is almost as addictive as other social medias and heroin and so on. And instead, if it hasn't been too long, given them challenging mental stimulation, and they're actually bringing back function. Another thing that we have found is that dehydration, not enough water every day, is lethal to brain function, because this is what happens. You know, your brain and body are approximately what the world water solid mass is, 25-75. So your brain's about 75% water. But the neurons, the thinking cells, are anywhere from 80, 85, 86% water. So you don't drink enough water, and the neurons begin to shrink because there's not enough neurons to plump them up. And as they shrink, the brain tissue pulls right away from the skull, which increases your risk for headaches and definitely increases your risk for dementia. That can be reversed if it hasn't gone on too long. But many, many young people in this country drink no water at all. They drink only sodas and soft drinks and fruit juice and so on. And the brain needs water. I was listening to a researcher at Stanford University, and he told me the most graphic thing I've ever heard about dehydration. He said this: your body organs will give up their need for water in order to serve the brain, because everything starts in the brain, and if it doesn't have enough water, it will not direct the body organs to work properly. Now, he says this is what happens. 1% level of dehydration, and you're not even thirsty yet, will give you a 5% decrease in cognitive ability, especially in things like mathematics and science. So you go into a test and you knew the information, but you're dehydrated and you just can't remember diddly or squat. So he says, if the brain begins to get desperate for water, the biggest collection of fluid at any one time in the body is in the bladder. So the brain will send a message down to the bladder and say, I'm dying up here for fluid. Dehydrate some of that urine and send the fluid up to me. That is not a pretty thought. He says that puts another spin on the term pea brain. So I encourage you to avoid being a pea brain. All right, is that enough for today? We'll have some more. One more. I'm watching the time. Well, don't look at me. I'm a brain function specialist. I'm not a technologist. Oh, excellent question. I have never, ever found a piece of what I consider bona fide research, especially if it's double-blind, that I could not find something in both Scripture and the spirit of prophecy to back it up. So this is my brain's opinion. I think we're talking about this Friday night. The Bible tells us the kind of behaviors that are best for us to live, to stay young and be healthy for a very long time. But it doesn't tell us why. Brain function research is the first branch of science that I believe really tells us, gives us the reason for why the Bible and the spirit of prophecy says what they say. And we'll talk about that Friday night. Thanks for coming. You're wonderful.